You don't see panic in the streets of Kyiv. People carry on. People are tired. People are suffering at many different levels. I hear it all the time, but people keep carrying on. And
before we continue, we invite you to follow our channel, the only American show reporting live from Ukraine every day.
good evening. This is Joe Lindsley talking to you from Kyiv, and today we'll talk about this minerals deal between the United States and Ukraine, still to be approved. And this is Radio War Day 1098. This is one of the first nights in several weeks where, as far as I recall, that we've not heard intense explosions over the city, although it's still early, things could happen. And the main thing to look at today is this deal that is sort of tentatively agreed between President Zelensky, aka the Ukrainian people, and President Trump. And I will say overall, it looks a lot better than it did a few days ago, certainly a few weeks ago. And I think maybe here we can see, if we stay calm and steady, that there might have been a strategy to Trump's approach all along. I think a lot of people still say that doesn't excuse some of the comments Trump made against Zelensky personally. As Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, was explaining to the media the past 24 hours, that somehow there was a tiff and the personalities got involved. That's sort of to be expected, but in anything in life, and I'm sure we've all dealt with these things, Zelensky has been living in a war in a country that he could have fled. That's something to keep in mind. President Trump has been shot at, another thing to keep in mind, and then you can see how tensions can build on this. But the mineral deal, the first thing to note about it is that it doesn't talk at all about security. It really doesn't talk about security for Ukraine. Now, even if it did, that means nothing for Ukrainians, because you had the Budapest Memorandum from the 90s that, ostensibly seemed to give Ukraine some kind of protection, but really did not. And in return for Ukraine giving up not only its nuclear weapons, but actually its best weapons that even were not, even non-nuclear weapons. And that's, now it's clear that meant nothing. Security guarantees don't mean that much. But what we see with this mineral deal, I think it is very much in the style of Trump. It does have to talk to his MAGA base. There is a lot of skepticism about Ukraine. As I pointed out in recent threads on X and many of my broadcasts, the skepticism for Ukraine, as I see it, from people I know, even people who are close to Trump, is really a hatred and skepticism of Washington. And they so closely aligned Washington with Ukraine these past years that they said, okay, if Washington's supporting Ukraine, we're not going to support it. But if you look closer at the details, as I have noted, you can see that, Washington under Joe Biden actually did a lot to harm Ukraine, really restricted Ukraine, and really, in the way they did it, they wore out the American people. They made Americans think that a lot more money was coming to Ukraine than really was. And you'll see we'll be posting tonight on my Instagram and X account. But there was a big report by American economists and Ukrainian economists examining deeply, sort of in a Doge-like way, the actual spending for Ukraine. And there was, the Biden administration figures said something like $68 billion in military aid. And if you actually look at the valuation of what was provided, according to these economists, it's more like $18 billion, so significantly less. But even more than that, even then, everything that was given to Ukraine was something old, an old weapon that the U.S. had purchased, paid for a long time ago, even back to the 90s or earlier. And the White House had discretion on what price, what valuation to give those weapons. In some ways you could say the valuation in a real way is nothing. It was sitting in storage. It was costing the U.S. to keep these things in storage. And so even the cost of transporting them to Ukraine would be cheaper than keeping them forever in storage. And then if you look, and this is a big thing that's missed, but the innovative Ukrainians have MacGyvered so many of these weapons in the U.S. and found ways to make them more useful. They found out where they are not effective and how to make them more effective. So incredible information and intel for the U.S. And I think that part of this is still missed. There's the focus on the minerals, which Ukraine has, as does Greenland, but Ukraine also has a population that is incredibly motivated to innovate. As I saw at that special defense conference here last week, the Brave One conference, that as I mentioned, General Petraeus, who was here, coolest event he'd ever been to because of the spirit of innovation. And I think that's really an area where the U.S. can gain a lot from Ukraine. But let's look real quick at this mineral deal. It's called a Reconstruction Investment Fund. The idea is aimed at securing long-term peace and boosting Ukraine's economy so the U.S. and Ukraine can be good partners. And, there is a sense, if this is going to work well, it's like it is now all of a sudden pushing Russia aside as a third world backwater for now and saying, hey, Ukraine is the partner to work with. And I think this is a message that could resonate with MAGA. I mean, even President Trump does have to sell these things he doesn't have to. I think he can persuade people in many ways, but I think there is a sense you have to sell this to the people who are expecting what they elected. And so I think shifting this to more of a business deal first, without talking security, I can see the strategy behind it. I think a lot of people are still nervous about that, of course. But the main idea, and even in these ideas, it's still pretty ambiguous, is that Ukraine will contribute 50% of future revenues from its natural resources, minerals, oil, gas, to this reconstruction investment fund. And those contributions will be reinvested to help Ukraine grow and stay secure. So in a sense, that will be the source of the military support for Ukraine will come from this fund. A key side note on that is what President Macron said when he put his hand on President Trump's knee, is that Russia really should pay for this war. I think that's a big thing that still has to be discussed. But in this case, this is a way to make Ukraine pay, but perhaps also to make a strong strategic partnership between Ukraine and the U.S. And Ukraine is, even the Russians are occupying some of the most mineral-rich places of Ukraine, but Ukraine still has many resources to offer that are very essential in the global semiconductor supply chain. And so it would make sense to have this Ukraine as an ally in this case. On the American side, they're committing this long-term financial support according to this deal, and this includes investments to help rebuild Ukraine's economy and infrastructure. But when I see that, an important caveat, we'll hear all this talk of rebuilding. As I see here every day, Ukraine is rebuilding every day. Little businesses that get bombed rebuild and reopen. They don't get help from the outside. They're just doing it on their own. Usually when I see the word rebuilding, see elite, powerful Europeans, but especially Americans who are here to buy cheap assets and profit from it. That's really, from my perspective, that's what rebuilding means for a lot of people. And in fact, in recent weeks, I've met some Americans who are quite gleeful at the money they can make here. It's good. I mean, Ukraine needs these investments. Just like people move into your favorite neighborhood and start to buy a property and force the people out. That's happening. But unfortunately, Ukraine needs it. And it makes some people sick here, but that's how the world goes round, as John Prine saying. Anyway, so there is a good deal of that here, but I think in ways that it certainly can benefit the U.S. And the U.S., in this deal positions itself to have sort of prime access to Ukraine's assets. So this deal is much less exploitive than the first proposed deal. Okay, that's maybe the art of the deal, how negotiations work. And a credit to President Lindsley. You have two entertainers and producers here, Zelensky and Trump. Very interesting, the interplay between them. But let's remember that they both came from the world of entertainment in many ways, and can both play this game pretty well. So the U.S. gets sort of privileged access to investment opportunities here in Ukraine. And something that's not mentioned in the deal, but I keep insisting because it's clear to me that with Ukraine as a partner, the U.S. will have as a partner a country that has the largest army in Europe and the most battle-experienced army in the free world. And on top of that, I would say really one of the most innovative, if not the most innovative, sort of per capita population in the world. People who truly love America, who truly believe in freedom, so much that they're willing to bleed and die for it. To me, that's the greatest benefit. And none of that, of course, is mentioned in the deal. It is simply focused on access to minerals. And the agreement also says there will be legal protections. This is to protect Ukraine, legal protections to make sure that Ukraine's contributions are monitored and used properly. And this is also to avoid corruption, but also in a way that would not interfere with Ukraine if it does want to, make an attempt to join the European Union or other such projects. Of course, Ukraine's parliament must ratify the deal. To me, it's not clear what role the United States Senate would have, but, foreign treaties are supposed to be the province of the U.S. Senate. So I think there would have to be some role there. And again, the deal makes no mention of security guarantees. But in that sense, it almost treats Ukraine as an already free and sovereign partner and not as a charity case. I think that's very important. I think that's a sea change almost here, that this deal treats Ukraine as an equal partner and not a charity case. That's pretty powerful, and I think we should sort of pay attention to how that part of it shakes out. And then additionally, Trump, I mean, he had said, or it seems he said, that Ukraine will have what it needs to fight back against Russia until there is a peace deal. This is also a new, this is maybe now that this deal is agreed, he's going to be more open to speaking favorably about Ukraine, and now put some pressure on Russia. Perhaps in the dance of this negotiation, that's how it works. But he said Ukraine will have what it needs to fight back against Russia. Now, the question is, will this be a Joe Biden method of, as long as it takes, giving Ukraine defensive resources? Or will it mean giving Ukraine, not only the tools, a lot of which they already have, but also the permission to really take out the sources of the Russian attacks upon Ukraine? Everyone here and everyone who pays close attention here knows Ukraine can cause a lot of damage to Russia pretty quickly. They just need the green light from Washington, or they need to decide to go it alone. And I think Ukrainians have judged, they want to stay in the good graces of Washington, and especially now. So that's a big question. When Trump says Ukraine will have what it needs to fight back, is that enough to stay alive, or is it enough to really try to make a push to win? And I think if Ukraine were given the resources, we could have a very different situation in a few months. So that is the best overview I can give you right now of the mineral deal. On top of that, there was sort of very disheartening episode for a lot of pro-Ukraine people from Washington. Stephen Feinberg, who's Trump's nominee to be Deputy Secretary of Defense, was asked by Senator Mark Kelly, the astronaut from Arizona, did Russia invade Ukraine? Not a difficult question. And Feinberg, nominee to be Deputy Secretary of Defense, he wanted to answer it. He stuttered, and he would not answer that question. He said this is all high-level negotiations, and I understand there's things you can't discuss when you're in high-level negotiations, but that is like saying that the Earth might be flat. It just doesn't make sense. And how can you be strong when you're projecting such a point? So that's sent people to confusion. Maybe part of the strategy is to confuse people. And so there's the best report I can offer you from today. As always, I'll underscore that you don't see panic in the streets of Kyiv. People carry on. People are tired. People are suffering at many different levels. I hear it all the time. I hear, many stories of pain and frustration, but people keep carrying on. And I don't see a deep sense of despondency here. So until tomorrow, this is our Radio War Day 1098.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?